I'm Jonathan Colopy, Executive Director with the Y of San Diego County. Welcome to the Y Be Well podcast. Today, our guest is actually a good friend, Dr. Brian Alman. Brian, thank you for being with us today. Our topic, his latest book, Less Stress for Kids. And as I understand, it is really a mind-body program to help children relax and let go. And so tell me a little bit about this, Dr. Alman. I'm excited to hear about this latest book of yours and really, what led to this.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me, Jonathan. I always
Pleasure.
enjoy being with you, and this is such an important show. I know what you're up to, something very important here. So as soon as you invited me, my answer was a big yes.
Fantastic. Thank
Here
you
we
for
are.
accepting.
Yeah. So I had written 13 books all about self-help, self-care as a result of my work with what's called the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And I've been part of that since even before it started with my partner, who's the originator of that, Vincent Felitti, a medical doctor here in San Diego. And we've been partnering on the books, on an app, on the ACE since, like I said before it started, every week for decades now. So
that's fantastic. I know the Y has done a lot of work in the space of ACEs, but a lot of people don't know what that acronym is.
Right. So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So difficulties that we all go through as kids from birth to 18, which could be anything like a divorce in the family. That would be an adverse childhood experience. That would be an ACE score of 1. Somebody in the family having trouble with drinking or an addiction, that would be another ACE score. Somebody that has depression or anxiety, which these things are very common, even though they're not talked about, they're in all of our families. So Dr. Fletti and I, many years ago, started realizing when we're working with a weight loss center and seeing wonderful results, because we're both really focused on helping people help themselves, that some people got better, lost the weight, and then gained it all back right away. So we started asking them, what happened? You were so successful, you did so great. And as it turned out, that was the beginning of ACEs, because then when they told us about experiences they'd had years ago as kids growing up, these things came back up when they lost the weight. Sort of the issues came back that they'd never resolved growing up or as teenagers. And so that was the beginning of ACEs. We realized there were 10 very common things that we all go through. I was the treatment solution expert. He was the assessment. So we had assessment and treatment, and that's what we've been doing together. But Jonathan, you'll appreciate this because a number of years ago, because now millions of people have gone through this. It's in 120 countries. And so all of our work is now all over the world. We added what we call a positive childhood experiences assessment. So we added another assessment because a lot of people said to us, yes, I had some hard times growing up. I was bullied. That's another adverse childhood experience. I didn't fit in. I was always alone, whatever it was. But I did have some positive experiences. I had a coach like Jonathan. I had a teacher.
I would have to believe that gives you armor to take on some of those other things.
Exactly, Jonathan. So then we're able to utilize their positive childhood experiences and apply them to helping them help themselves with their difficulties and adverse experiences. So it turned out to really be great feedback from the participants. We added that. It's in the books, it's in the app, it's in the, all the work we do now. But fundamentally, the adverse childhood experiences are difficult experiences that we've all been through, but we're all raised nice. People don't talk about difficult things. So we tend to hold it in and not talk about it. And the families don't want you to tell anybody about their uncle's drinking or there was sexual abuse in the family. They don't want people talking about that. So the kids have to hold that in. And then what we found was, and now there are thousands and thousands of medical journal articles on this in every country, that all of that holding of the emotions in turns into chronic illnesses, Yes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, autoimmune illnesses, leads to more addictions, and we realize that addictions are actually people's self-medication. So it's not all a problem. Addictions actually are a person's subconscious solution to
Sure.
solve the underlying problem. So there's so many difficult and challenging things we had to figure out in order to
Well,
help people help themselves.
that was foundational work in terms of how children are understood and worked with. And so I appreciate the work that has been done. And that I would assume has led us to some of the work that you're talking about today related to your latest book, because
Well,
we're
you
talking
know what,
about resources.
what's so funny, Jonathan, is that like I said at the beginning, I'd written 13 books, but they were all for what I call grown-up size kids like us,
Yes,
adults, kids in big bodies.
yes,
And I was putting my youngest to bed, and I always told stories and, kind of these, meaningful but hidden, positive psychology stories. And my kid said to me, my youngest, Dad, why don't you ever write a book for kids? Kids have problems too. We have issues too. You write all these books for adults. What about us? I thought,
yeah.
that's true. I started writing that book, Less Stress for Kids, that night.
Um,
And 6 months later, which is fast because it usually takes me a year to two to write a book, I finished the book and then I started testing it in
mm.
schools in inner cities and suburbs, charter schools, public schools, private schools. And the book kept changing and improving. And it went from a book to an activity book where it's one technique for every week of the school year. And then there's a drawing or some kind of exercise where the kid is able to draw their feelings or express their difficulties and, whatever it is, draw your breathing pattern when you're relaxed and just all kinds of playful, creative things that the kids came up with. So there's one new mind body healing, positive childhood experience, adverse childhood experience solution for every week of the school year.
I
The
love,
teacher, yeah. So the teacher
love
uses
that.
it,
Love that
everybody uses it.
paradigm.
Yeah.
Love that
So
paradigm because if it's once a week, then it kind of grounds that. They practice it through the particular week. Parents could be involved in it, teachers could be
exactly.
involved in it, just
Exactly.
to reinforce the practice. What a wonderful
Yeah.
concept.
And as you would know, because we've known each other for years, it's all very supportive, encouraging, positive. There's no getting worse before you feel better. There's no judgment or difficulty. It's all about how can we utilize our life experiences to grow, improve our lives, and learn. And with all these kids helping us from all around the country and all these different schools, the book kept getting better and better. And then recently, weeks ago, it came out in Spanish because same thing. My kid said to me, it's really good. The book's in English and so many kids are reading it and schools are buying it. That's so great. But a lot of kids, English is not their first language and they
Mm.
might want to read it and learn about it in Spanish. You're right. So I got translators and I got people to come in and help. And then we got the book out in Spanish and now it's available both in Spanish and English.
That is
Yeah.
wonderful and so important in terms of making sure there's access for many people. What I really appreciate is just the whole methodology behind this in the sense of, these experiences, because often therapeutically, when you're dealing with material, that can be challenging. It can
Yeah.
stir up some different things, but it sounds like this is really about empowering youth. It's giving them skills to be able to relax. I
Yep.
think coming out of COVID, where we have a youth mental health crisis, something like this
Right.
is so critical and such a wonderful resource to have.
Exactly. It's so interesting the way you put it, Jonathan, also because every technique of the week, every technique for the school year starts off with accepting people with where they are, accepting their challenges, their emotional worries or fears, their self-criticalness, or their worry about what everyone else thinks of them, or feel too embarrassed to say anything. So whatever the issue, the technique is for the week, it's all accepting people where they are. We call it unconditional acceptance. There's a lot of listening, a lot of support. So the kids in the class are actually helping themselves and they're helping each other because they go around the room and share their drawings and share their experiences. So they're actually learning from one another as well as what they get from inside themselves.
So Brian, this just more recently released, isn't it a new book that has come out?
Yes, the Spanish version is very recent, hot off the presses, weeks old. The English version, it came out as a like a pocketbook for a couple of years, but then we expanded it into the activity book based on
Hmm,
the feedback from the students. So that is more recent. So
great.
in the format that people would see it now, like I have it in English, so it's this size because there's an activity for every week. And then we did the Spanish one the exact same way, exactly the
Wonderful.
same. And yeah, and again, Jonathan, just to be clear, it's all from the kids' feedback and the kids' direction.
Ah,
The teachers were helpful, the parents were helpful, the kids were the most helpful.
so a fun little tidbit that I learned is the first translation into Spanish was done with somebody with a Boston accent.
Oh gosh. Yeah, so I translated it because I have a lot of these audios and a lot of videos, and I've been learning Spanish. I can try it.
Sure.
Let me just try it. So I recorded one of the techniques in Spanish to the best of my ability. I brought it to my colleagues at Kaiser. I played it for them, and they could not stop laughing. And they were belly laughing. One of them started crying. They were laughing so hard. And I'm, what? What?
Um,
What? And they
yeah.
said, we've never heard anybody speak Spanish with a Boston accent. And it's just way too funny. So that was the end of my recordings. I then hired professionals and I hired people that could do a much better job. That was my lesson.
Well,
Okay.
I appreciate that you made a run at it. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing that.
Yes,
So if you
yes.
would, give me a couple examples of the kind of assignments, the interactive nature of it, and how that translates into relaxation and letting go.
Right.
That's so
So
important for all of us. You're gearing this towards youth, but I look at, adults, I would think would be able to take advantage of some of these techniques as well.
absolutely. The parents, the teachers, the staff, everybody ends up getting very engaged and involved because I say the small sized kids, medium sized kids, grown up sized kids,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
all need help with letting go and
sure.
relaxation and mind body healing. So, an example of the technique in the book is people will say, you know what, when you get really stressed, remember to breathe. Well, everybody knows that, but usually it's like, okay, well, that didn't help. What do I do now? Well, take another breath. Oh, well, I really don't feel any better. In fact, I'm starting to feel worse. What do I do now? So we say, okay, here's one of the techniques. On your exhales only, just say your name to yourself. So just take an inhale, and on your exhale, you would say Jonathan, whoever the person is, they say their own name. Let's do another one. Nothing special here. Just inhale. And on the exhale, say your name again to yourself, not out loud. And let's do one more. Okay. So you see what happens in just a few
Yeah,
breaths by saying
yeah.
your own name to yourself. You are getting yourself more relaxed. And by the way, when you exhale and say your name, you're letting go because whenever you exhale, you're letting go. So now
Mhm.
you're letting go of stress. You're relaxing with your name. You're getting more in the present tense. You're
Yeah.
becoming more centered, more grounded. And it's just that simple. And then we would have people in the book, draw a picture, write your name, draw a
Um,
picture of your breathing. And so something as simple as that, and it's totally personalized, Jonathan, because it's you. It's your
yeah,
name. It's not, certain word or a word from Sanskrit or a prayer, meditation, or affirmations. No, no, it's just your own name, and you
yeah.
say it on your exhales,
Well,
and then students will come to us years later and say, "I
uh,
still use that technique all the time." Yeah,
Brian, that is so beautiful. I'll self-report just as we did that, and that was maybe 5 seconds long or
yeah,
so. It provided just this, as you said, centering, grounding, and
right,
allowing me just to be present. And so often in
exactly,
our minds are always meant to be filling with material, and
right,
so just it allows to just be in the moment. And I can think of how critical that is
right.
for learning in the school system. and
Exactly.
in everything we do in life.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, Jonathan, because you and I know each other from sports. That's
Yeah.
how we originally met. And when I teach this to school athletes, all
Mm,
the way up to amateur, Olympic, and professional athletes, I just have them use that same technique, and I have them inhale and say the word focus and exhale their name.
mm.
Inhale, focus, say it to yourself, exhale your name. And whether they're place kickers on the football team or quarterbacks, or they're runners, or they're high jumpers, or they're soccer players, whatever their sport is, tennis, golf, inhale, focus, exhale your name. And people end up using it all throughout the practice and competition. And years, decades later, so simple. And I love simple techniques that really work.
Yeah.
That's what I'm attracted to.
And I think the simpler, the more readily it's assimilated and utilized. So I like what you led into. You led into then you have this experience, this drawing where they,
Right.
draw a picture themselves.
Yep.
I love how that then anchors the experience for them. It's tactile.
Right. Exactly. And it's nonverbal.
Mm.
And it's verbal. So they're talking to the kids in the class, or they're, thinking to themselves, and, they're verbally talking or verbally self-talking. And at the same time, they're drawing, which is nonverbal. So you have verbal with nonverbal. We even have them do drawing with their non-dominant hand and
Love
their
it.
dominant hand. So we're really getting to people's inner resources
Yes.
on many levels without having to explain it, without making it complicated. We're just having them practice it, and sure enough, they
Ah,
love the results.
very impactful. I'm gonna go in a different direction with you,
Okay.
just for a moment. So every time I have an opportunity to have a guest and have a conversation like this, it's an opportunity for me to tap an expert and find out what they do, what's a critical part of their well-being strategy in their life, a critical element. And so, because we can learn from yourself and others. So I wonder what is critical to your well-being practice?
Well, it's so interesting that you would put it that way, because we have to practice what we teach.
Hmm.
Because people can tell when they collaborate with us right away if they can trust you, right away if you actually are living what you're teaching and practicing what we're
Sure.
teaching. And we said as parents before we got started today was that everybody's a work in progress.
Yes.
Ourselves, our kids, our neighbors, our students, we're all works in progress. Everybody's evolving. So for me, the way things start is the way they usually go. So
Mm.
my morning, usually, I would say probably 364 days a year, every day, I start off with just taking about 30 minutes of time. I have a journal. I do express my emotions in my journal with my non-dominant hand,
Ah,
because I just really want to let go. I don't want to
sure.
go back and read it. I don't want to really review it. I just want to release. So I'll just release my feelings. After I empty out, which doesn't take long, usually minutes, I'll go to my dominant hand, practice that breathing we did together, and write down whatever comes to me spontaneously with my dominant hand, best answers, best ideas. I just write that down. So that's the beginning of my day. And as you will probably expect, because I think you're much the same way, because we've worked out so many times together, I go to my workout routine in the morning. I
Great.
take a lot of time to work out every day. So sort of healthy body, healthy mind, healthy
Yeah.
emotions. And
Yeah.
like you, I run, I bike, I swim, I practice my boxing. So I love training. It's not really having to push myself. It actually feels good because it feels right. And
Yeah.
then after that, then I'm ready. Then I'm
Yeah.
ready for work. Then I'm ready for my meetings. Then I'm ready for all of that. So that's the way I start my day. And then, of course, at the end of the day, because I always want to go to sleep good and dream good, because the last things you think about at bedtime are always the first things you think about in the morning. So I
Mm.
actually want to go to bed in a good space. So I go back to my journal, non-dominant hand, express what I'm feeling and the stress of the day, whatever. After I get that out, to my breathing, to my dominant hand, whatever kind of inner wisdom just kind of bubbles up from inside. Close the journal, and I'm off into
Wow,
dreamlands.
you've anchored the day beautifully, and actually, I think I might borrow some of that. I hadn't really thought about the non-dominant hand as ways of expressing self, and so that's a wonderful thing that I may pick up there. So I appreciate that.
What you know what's funny about that too, though? You don't want anyone to come back and read your journal.
Yeah,
And if you're
that's one
drawing
way.
and if you're drawing and scribbling and doodling with your
Yeah,
non-dominant, nobody could ever read it ever anyway. So
effective. Yes.
yeah, so it's a let go, and then it's also getting to whatever kind of wisdom you can get with your dominant hand. Yeah,
So,
what were you going to
so,
say?
so
Yeah,
where do we find this book for those that are listening and want to pick up a
yeah.
copy, order a copy?
Amazon has all of my books.
Excellent.
Yeah, they
Excellent.
carry all of the books, and that's the best way to get it.
Perfect.
It's easy. I think that's how most of us buy books. In fact, I just was setting up a book signing party with a place called Book Tales in Encinitas that my kid introduced me to, because sometimes people like to feel the book, maybe meet the person that wrote it, and
Sure.
meet the person who inspired it.
Mm.
So I
Oh,
like
that's
those
lovely.
experiences too. So I can share
Lovely.
that. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Alman, really a pleasure to have this conversation. I appreciate the expertise that you've offered in the community and beyond, and the difference that you're making. So please just keep carrying on, which I know you will. Anything in closing?
What I would say is one of the sayings I was raised with as a kid that's always been important for me to share, which is when you need a helping hand, look at the end of your wrist.
Mm,
So you can really learn how to depend on yourself. Now, of course, as we know, Jonathan, teams matter.
sure.
Teams of people, teams at work. I have a wonderful team from many countries that I work with, and that helped me 30 years of developing this app that we have. So I love teamwork and team play, but ultimately we
Yeah.
have to be able to depend on ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that saying kind of has always stuck with me.
I
And
like that. We're the steward of our life. So
right.
that's a wonderful symbol of it. Brian,
Yes.
pleasure. Dr. Alman, really appreciate this conversation. And till the next time, and those listening today, please be well to the next time that we're together.